So now we have Francis' theory of simulation speech. My question is, if we create an exoskeleton with supernal and then use the front end of Lightning to provide a totally different topological experience for modern audiences, are we changing the want? And therefore, are we changing the translator? So that's where I see the radical mission of eternity as well. It's not just about translating ancient text and making it disseminating to a wider audience, but it's about radically transforming what a scholar does in today's world. So to that, Francis.
Thank you, brother. Brian, can you come up? I also want to thank not just Nico, but Brian, who's tirelessly worked for tonight. Brian, come up on stage. Yeah. This is another one of those crazy kismet things. We were buddies, same time Bear and I met in San Francisco in our 20s, fell way out of touch, and then he randomly reached out one day at the exact right time where I'm like, I really need someone to help me build this stuff, and I don't have anyone. Thank you for diving in and making this happen. This whole thing is because of you. Oh, no. Thank you. Thank you, Brian. All right. We've got an after party to get to at 8 p.m., and so I already talked too long earlier, and that's why you didn't get a break. I'm sorry. And we've already taxed your patience. But I am going to give you a brief history of simulation theory. And I really appreciate Scott and Zohar coming up here and giving this the credibility of hearing two builders. Scott built Invisible alongside all of our other incredible engineering and operations and other partners. And now he's building, Supernal, and using that architecture, we're going to have an incredible tool for translators. And what Zohar is doing, I can't wait for you guys to see. We'll send it out when it launches. But when you interact with Virgil, your own AI, to guide you through the classics and develop your own thought and map out your own thought and say, this is what you believe and these are your influences and what are you curious about, it's going to be incredible. All right. The only thing worse than standing between an audience and dinner is standing between an audience and an after party. You're going to love the hospitality, art, and musical performances we have in store for you. Thank you again for your presence and for patiently hearing us out tonight. I ask for your attention for just 20 more minutes, and then we'll wrap up with some brief Q&A on the dance floor at the after party. There's no Q&A here. We don't have time. You didn't think you'd escape an evening with us without a dose of existential philosophy and a brief history of ideas, did you? This is a story I'm about to tell you about the truth that is buried in an almost forgotten past, which raises the question, why does forgetting take place in the first place as a historical phenomenon? Why do we forget? If we don't understand the forgetting, we won't fully appreciate the remembering. As Heidegger put it, being reveals itself in the act of withdrawing. This brief history of simulation theory begins a long time ago in a country far, far away. The ancient Chinese built a simulator in 1200 BC called the I Ching. We call it the Book of Changes, but really it would be more accurate to call it the Simulator of Changes, because it is not a book. It is not like any other book I've read before or since. The I Ching contains 10 to the 112th power possibilities of change inside of it, more atoms than there are in the known universe, which is 10 to the 82nd. How did they arrive at such an elaborate system? Using combinatorial math. They set out to map the laws of change, to decode the patterns of life's many situations. They begin with the yin-yang, which is both 1 and 2 binary code, base 2 computing. From the interaction of the yin-yang, the dynamic of change emerges, the third, and that introduces trigrams. There are 8 possible combinations of yang and yin in the trigrams. Yang, yin, yang, 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 yin and yin, etc. There's 8 trigrams. And these are the bagua, the elements: fire, water, mountain, earth, wind, lake, thunder, and heaven. The bagua, the trigrams, combine with each other to form hexagrams, 6s. And these hexagrams, there are 64 possibilities of how you can combine the hexagrams. They can be yang, 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 yin, 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 yang, like that. There are 64 hexagrams. So if I gave you all a homework assignment, and I said, think about every situation you've ever been in life, and categorize them into 64 types of situations, that would be the homework assignment that would result in the I Ching. Okay, now imagine a deck of cards, like a tarot deck. These situations correspond to the archetypal situations in life, like difficult beginnings, sudden defeat, steady progress, stagnation, retreat to the mountain, gathering allies, peace at the lake, sudden victory, etc. As the situations of life flow and interact with each other, combinations emerge. So you pull 2 cards, and it could be any card from the deck, shuffle the deck. That results in 64 squared, or 4,092 combinations. Now imagine you had a flat screen TV with 4,092 pixels. You could see you could watch a movie on 4,092 pixels, but it's not ultra high res, right? Okay, now shuffle the deck again. Instead of pulling 2 cards, pull 3 cards. That's 64 cubed. Okay, now shuffle the deck again. Now combine the deck in every possible way it can be combined. You get 64 to the 64th power, which is 10 to the 112th, where you play out every permutation. The ancient Chinese built a simulator in 1200 BC and just did not have the compute power to run it, the graphics to visualize it, or the metaverse to turn it into a massively multiplayer online video game. Good thing I'm a tech founder living in 2025. Just think of the possibilities. They're endless. Let me say that again to make sure that it registers. The ancient Chinese built a simulator in 1200 BC that contains practically infinite combinations of life situations. They just did not have the compute power to run it and realize its potential. The time has come for this truth to be realized. The latest breakthroughs in computer science, artificial intelligence and quantum computing, in neuroscience, in astrophysics, and in quantum physics itself have produced a scientifically grounded 21st century cosmology which is not inconsistent with medieval and ancient cosmologies. Yes, that was a double negative. In other words, it is consistent with medieval and ancient cosmologies. Indeed, our ancestors fully comprehended the concepts of the multiverse and simulation theory. Professor Thurman introduces his translation of Padmasambhava's Bhardothol Dole, the great book of natural liberation through understanding in the between, also known in the West as the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which I quoted from earlier, with a brilliant apology or defense of the legitimacy of the very subject matter of the book. The journey of our consciousness after death, the belief in the existence of an eternal soul. Why does this topic still matter? Why should we take these beliefs seriously? Why does this 8th century book still deserve to be read, to be studied, to be taken seriously? Is it anything more than a fossil, worth nothing more than its value as a historical archive? Bob nobly accepts the challenge and takes on the secular materialists who dismiss the book, like all religious books, as nothing more than an unscientific, pre-modern superstition. I will not at this time attempt to summarize Bob's argument, but I encourage you to read it for yourself. Standing at his side, virtually, and taking up his cause, I'm going to make my own brief defense of ancient and medieval cosmology. And before you bet on it, of course my take is going to be trippy and weird. I assume that most people in the audience have watched the movie The Matrix. Hands up if you watched the movie The Matrix. Okay, great. In the early 2000s, the Matrix movies popularized the concept that what we call reality may actually be a computer simulation. And I also assume that most of you are aware that the richest man on earth, Elon Musk, believes we're living in a simulation. At the very least, he is. The contemporary resurgence of this simulation hypothesis traces back to a 2003 paper by Oxford University's Nick Bostrom entitled, "Are You Living in a Computer Simulation?" ? In summary, Bostrom's syllogism argues thus: is it possible to build simulations as high resolution as what we call reality? If yes, then is it desirable to build such simulations? If yes, then there is a 99.99% chance we are already living in a computer simulation. And I assume that most of you are aware that Ray Kurzweil, Peter Diamandis, and other prominent futurists have been heralding that the singularity is near, the singularity is near. What is this singularity they're referring to? They believe that artificial intelligence will compound into AGI, artificial general intelligence, which will pass all Turing tests, superseding human intelligence, and that this AGI phase will even more rapidly compound into ASI, artificial superintelligence, which Bob was referring to, which will transcend human intelligence in every way, ushering in a utopia of abundance. Lastly, I assume that you're aware that Brian Johnson believes he is going to live forever, and that Sam Altman believes that all of human history can be summarized in 3 words: deep learning worked. Longevity and AI are all the hype, and their promise is essentially Luciferian. You're going to live forever, and you're going to be God. You're going to live forever, and you're going to be God. You're going to live forever, and you're going to be God. A little creepy. Or at the very least, that we're going to have a genie in our pocket that fulfills all of our wishes before it's inevitably installed as a chip in your brain. To be clear, I disagree with a lot of this. Beware of utopian neo-religions. They're not grounded in an understanding of economics, history, and philosophy. But whether or not we agree with all the extraordinary claims being made, this is the zeitgeist, the contemporary worldview, the techno-futurist conversation happening all over the world, exciting entrepreneurs and investors, and confounding institutional policymakers and decision makers everywhere. This is the emerging 21st century cosmology that is considered credible, scientific, and relevant, or at the least, very increasingly popular. Although it has emerged from 20th century secular materialism, it represents a profound reversal of its central belief, a complete departure. If The Innovator's Dilemma by Clayton Christensen established a theory for how business models are disrupted, Thomas Kuhn's The Structure of Scientific Revolutions established a theory for how entire scientific, philosophical, and civilizational paradigms shift like tectonic plates. Our society's core belief system is changing rapidly, and very few of us are fully aware that it is happening before our very eyes. Allow me to explain the paradigm shift that I perceive. Last year, David Bentley Hart published All Things Are Full of Gods, The Mysteries of Mind and Life, to make a profound but ultimately simple point based on neuroscience and quantum physics, etc. The essential debate that we are having is whether consciousness emerged from matter and energy. Big Bang came first, evolution happened, consciousness emerged. That's secular materialism. That's the 20th century. Consciousness emerging from matter and energy over 14 billion years. Or whether matter and energy emerged from consciousness, i.e. the consciousness came before the Big Bang or co-evolved. They co-evolved together. In the 19th and 20th centuries, secular materialists believe the former. But anyone who believes that we're living in a simulation, whether it's a computer simulation or the mind of God, anyone who believes that we're living in a simulation or that singularities arise eventually realizes that they believe the latter, only to find themselves suddenly in agreement with all prior centuries before the 19th. One more time. 21st century simulation cosmology agrees with ancient and medieval cosmology. Matter and energy emerged from consciousness. Consciousness came first, not the other way around. Or perhaps consciousness and matter and energy non-dually co-manifest each other. If you believe you're living in a simulation, then you believe you're living in just one cosmos of many in the metaverse or the multiverse, or in Mark Zuckerberg's metaverse. And your mind is just one mind within what the ancients called Indra's net, which is like an internet of minds or beings that established the ultimate non-dual reality. Now let's go back to the supposedly primitive 8th century. Earlier this evening, I recited the first 3 paragraphs of the Bardoth Odol. I would now like to recite the 4th and 5th. All phenomena are ultimately selfless, empty, and free from conceptual elaboration. In their dynamic, they resemble an illusion, mirage, dream, or reflected image, a simulation, a celestial city, an echo, a reflection of the moon in water, a bubble, an optical illusion, or an intangible emanation. You should know that all things of cyclic existence, samsara, what we call the world, and nirvana accord in nature with these 10 similes of illusory phenomena. All phenomena are naturally uncreated. They neither abide nor cease, neither come nor go. They are without objective referent, signless, ineffable, and free from thought. The time has come for this truth to be realized." End quote. In other words, you are a singularity, living in a simulation. What you call reality is like an illusion. Haven't you noticed its illusory quality? Notice, everything is changing. We're about to go to the after party. Nothing in the material world is constant. Every moment passes into the next. Time cannot be halted or grasped. Don't attach to anything or anyone here, including and especially yourself or your significant other, because nothing in the physical cosmos stands the test of time. Ultimately, it's all empty. We assign words to things, attempting to explain how it all works, constructing meaning, but everything is just referencing everything else. Every cause has its own cause. Every correlation has its own correlations. Trace it all back, go back to the very beginning, if it even makes sense to speak in terms of the beginning of anything, let alone everything. Is there a source and a purpose, an unmoved mover, as Aristotle put it, at the origin? Or go to the end of time, if the end even makes sense. Is there a conclusion and fulfillment, an omega point, like the Jesuit Teilhard de Chardin, who was thinking about the internet 100 years ago? He talked about the omega point at the end of time. Padmasambhava's conclusion is that whatever meaning there is to be found transcends the physical cosmos. There is nothing objectively or independently actually here, because everything is changing. But everything here suggests something beyond, some metaphysical reality, some eternal existence, whatever came before the Big Bang, the source of the simulation. Language and thought itself are the same way. They point beyond language, beyond thought, towards non-dual reality. Ultimate reality, therefore, entails consciousness itself. Subject mind and object matter are non-dual. You cannot have one without the other. I'd like to share Professor Yarnall's comment on this profound but subtle point. This is not advancing a mind-only idealist view that consciousness alone exists. It is rather advocating that consciousness is always and inextricably a factor or aspect of all experience, and that it is incoherent to advocate any objective or mind-independent reality. You know the children's riddle of, if a tree falls in the woods and nobody hears it, does it make a sound? It does not make a sound. Thus, ultimate reality contains both eternity and time. That is, both the physical and metaphysical dimensions of existence. All sentient beings, all worlds, and all possibilities are expressed within it. This Indra's net, internet of beings and minds, this Indra's net, non-dual reality, universal or enlightened mind, or mind of God, is its own source, purpose, conclusion, and fulfillment. It is beyond words and concepts, it just is. This oneness or non-dual completeness or thusness or Tao leads to matter and energy, everything and everyone. This Buddha nature pervades all existence. In other words, you are a singularity living in a simulation. This isn't just Buddhist cosmology. The yin-yang, the symbol of Taoism, expresses the same cosmology. Hinduism makes us aware of Brahman, the universal consciousness, the simulator, the mind that is simulating everything. The Brahman, the universal consciousness that resides everywhere and in all things, but especially within the Atman, or the heart of all sentient beings. As the pre-Socratic Greek philosopher Parmenides put it, no more than one thing exists. If it's all connected, it's all ultimately just one. Or as Heraclitus and St. John put it, in the beginning was the Logos, the source code from which all of this apparent multiplicity and differentiation has sprung. Jewish cosmology articulates the game rules of the simulation so clearly. Economists will like this. The book of Genesis, or Bereshit, contains 3 curses. The curse of mortality. Sorry, Brian Johnson. The curse of labor. Sorry, Sam Altman. And the curse of division, of endless competition and jealousy, unavoidable political and linguistic misunderstandings, and insurmountable coordination costs, which is why there will be unlimited demand for Invisible. For what it's worth, I don't believe it's possible to solve these problems once and for all. I am not a utopian. So no, we won't live forever. We won't automate all forms of labor, and we won't eliminate violence, wars, nation states, the price system, markets, and companies with AI. Deep learning worked, but not that much. Padmasambhava was one of the central figures in the history of Vajrayana, the third of the three major schools or vehicles of Buddhism. Theravada Buddhism, the first and oldest vehicle, dating to the 6th century BC, focuses on the teachings of Siddhartha Gautama, aka the Buddha, for liberation from desire or attachment, which causes suffering. But on principle, Theravada Buddhism does not explicitly articulate a cosmology. The second vehicle, Mahayana Buddhism, which emerged from the 1st to the 3rd centuries AD, finally expresses the cosmology implicit in Theravada. You are living in a simulation, which I just briefly explained. They also have vimanas, which are UFOs, throughout all their sutras. Like the Lotus Sutra is full of UFOs. They're called vimanas. I don't know if Chloe's here, but she's doing some art on that. But yes, they believed in the 1st to the 3rd centuries that you're living in a simulation. So I'm about to quote from a text here. But Mahayana's emphasis shifts from individual liberation from suffering towards working for the liberation of all sentient beings. And this 3rd century Mahayana Buddhist text, the Lankavatara Sutra, states, all things have the nature of illusion and are like a dream. Understand the fundamental fact that the external world is nothing but a manifestation of mind. You're living in a simulation. You're a singularity living in a simulation. And the 1st century text, the Heart Sutra, states, form is emptiness, emptiness is form, which can also be rendered, the invisible is hidden in the visible emerges from the invisible. Code is everywhere, math is everywhere, physics is everywhere, you just can't see it. This doctrine is called emptiness or shunyata. Mahayana and Vajrayana share this doctrine in common, which is why Padmasambhava rearticulates it in his own words at the start of the Bardo Thodol. So what's the difference between the two schools? Padmasambhava emerged 1,200 years after the Buddha and 500 years after the first public manifestation of esoteric Mahayana teaching. The Dhammapada, the sayings of the Buddha from the Pali canon of the Theravada tradition, contains this prophetic verse. A rare event is the arising of a Buddha. Padmasambhava's emergence is significant because he is regarded by Vajrayana Buddhists who have this type of art that's all around us. This is Vajrayana art. Padmasambhava is regarded by Tibetan Buddhists not only as a second Buddha, but as a fully magical being, a messiah, an avatar, like Neo in the Matrix. The Buddhist word for messiah or avatar is Tathagata, or thus come and gone one. Thus come and gone from where exactly? They entered the Matrix and exited it. They also refer to him as a Nirmanakaya, or emanation body of the Buddha. He just showed up in the sim. He isn't just a teacher, he's a world historical figure, an action hero, and a god. His essence is divine, his abilities are supernatural, his feats are extraordinary. Every megalomaniacal founder's dream, basically. You can see why I admire him. I wish I could levitate and do that demo. As if that weren't enough, he isn't just a singularity, he's a viral singularity, a super spreader. His purpose as an avatar wasn't just to spread the teachings, but to make more avatars, to empower his disciples to levitate, conquer demons, uphold the cosmic balance, and liberate all sentient beings. Okay, wait. What? Pause. Before I make any skeptical scholars or cynical New Yorkers any more uncomfortable than I already have, of course, you can choose to believe this is all just mythology. And Padmasambhava is still very much worth studying purely as a philosopher. Joseph Campbell would happily explain it away. Joseph Campbell was based here in New York. As full of meaningful symbolism. Carl Jung would explain the psychological significance of the archetypes presented here, etc., etc. But Francis, why not skip this part of the story entirely? Why did you have to bring up all these woo-woo miracles? Can't we just go with spiritual vibes in the usual line, this isn't a religion, it's a philosophy? Not just your credibility, but all of our credibility is on the line tonight because we showed up and we're guilty by association with you. You didn't seriously invite all of your friends and allies, distinguished philanthropists, and your most important business partners to come out of the closet as a full-blown believer in mystical Tibetan Buddhism, did you? Supposing I did. Honestly, why the F not? After all, it's 2025. Maybe it's time for a new religious freedom movement. People have all kinds of crazy views these days. So let's embrace philosophical freedom as a society and be truly, fully open-minded. The First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution enshrines my religious belief and expression in this society. Congress shall pass no law saying it is not possible for me to believe that Padmasambhava was a transcendent being who entered history, aka the simulation, performed miracles, and left behind sacred teachings which have survived to this very day, which are worthy of AI preservation and reimagination. And that should go, not just for me, Francis, but for any member of society. Why did Carl Jung have to hide all his weird, cool, freaky shit from the academic world to be published posthumously? Have you read the Red Book? Have you seen that weird tower he built on his property? It's weird. It's cool. It's freaky. Nobody should fear getting canceled for their religious and philosophical beliefs, not even entrepreneurs and VCs. There, I said it. For the record, I believe in all religions. I'm a seeker. I was raised a Christian. I still consider myself a Christian. And I believe in the Nicene Creed. But because I'm a Christian, I have been a seeker my whole life. As Charles Taylor, the Christian theologian of the last century, advanced, faith is the temptation of the doubters, and doubt is the temptation of the faithful. We're all in an existential bind. Reason alone cannot lead to any certainty, although it is absolutely necessary. So I felt called at an early age to seek. Seek and ye shall find. The truth shall set you free. Everywhere I've sought, I've found. I am now a Christian, Jewish, Taoist, Buddhist, Hindu, Zoroastrian, Sufi, Socratic, pre-Socratic, Homeric, Pythagorean, Orphic, Shinto, Mesopotamian, Egyptian, Roman, Norse, and Druid pagan, and pre-Columbian Native American shamanist, because WWJD. While doctrines sometimes disagree on the margins, ultimately truth is one. To quote St. Thomas Aquinas, all truth is God's truth. By the way, historically, that sentence from that man, St. Thomas Aquinas, all truth is God's truth, kicked off the Renaissance because it was suddenly okay to translate Arabic texts. That's why we study science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and not just theology. Because St. Thomas Aquinas, whom I consider a co-founder of Wikipedia, invented V1 of the internet in the 13th century and called it the Summa Theologica, a system for connecting all truth. He was a tech visionary. Everywhere I seek, I find, but there are so many places I have yet to look, so many sacred texts I have still not read, so many that haven't even been translated yet. I cannot wait to read them and experience déjà vu, to find that somehow I remember and I already believe. This brief history of simulation theory had a handful of points to make. One, there have been many technological singularities, like the internet, like the printing press. The ancients were advanced, very advanced, mind-blowingly advanced. The history of computer science should not be told from Babbage or Boole. We have to go farther back to the I Ching. The Antikythera mechanism of ancient Greece was an analog computer with an advanced gear system like a modern clock that could predict eclipses and planetary movements. Two, there have been many human singularities like Rama, Krishna, Zarathustra, Lao Tzu, Moses, the Buddha, Socrates, Jesus, Mohammed, Padmasambhava, Hui Neng, Joan of Arc, and Leonardo da Vinci. While superior physical strength is visible in the form of muscle, superior consciousness is invisible to the naked eye, and by definition cannot be fully comprehended by those at lower levels. And yet by some mysterious mechanism which we call learning or remembering or teaching, somehow a transmission occurs from one being to another. There have been human singularities. There have been technological singularities. There have been human singularities. Three, they believed in extraordinary beings capable of extraordinary things. There have been many unexplained extraordinary phenomena. With Carlos Eyre, renowned historical scholar and tenured Yale University professor, who Jonathan B., who interviewed him. You can watch it on YouTube. Unbelievable. One of the most well-regarded historians in the United States of America, tenured Yale University professor, publishing a book, They Flew, A History of the Impossible, a comprehensive study of miracles. What are we cynical New Yorkers supposed to believe these days? Despite his scholarly skepticism, he concludes the evidence is overwhelming that levitation and other miracles took place. and ask Chloe about the CIA's program, MK Ultra. So were our ancestors en masse delusional liars, tricksters, con artists, or is magical realism more than a literary genre? Question mark. 4, they believed that they were living in a simulation, or rather what we would call a simulation. They worked out that material reality is like an illusion because it's always changing. That matter and energy emerge from consciousness, or perhaps non-dually co-manifest with each other. And their cosmology was vast, far vaster than ours. They believed in a multiverse. They believed that we are living in Indra's net, a universally interconnected matrix or internet of minds, beings, energies, bodies, souls, spanning all the worlds, not just in this cosmos, but in all the cosmoses in the eternally recurring multiverse, or universal mind, or divine creation. Look no further than Plato's cave and theory of the forms. It is all there. 5, so 1, there have been many technological singularities. 2, there have been many human singularities. 3, they believed in extraordinary beings capable of extraordinary things. 4, they believed they were living in a simulation. And 5a, they believed that progress is a simulation, or rather what we would call progress, which is external or material. They made tremendous progress, including technological progress. If it weren't for them, we wouldn't have reached the Industrial Revolution, but they were aware of dark ages, whereas we can't fathom centuries of technological or material regress or world historical trauma that severe. They were aware that no solution is final, no technological singularity replaces the need for more technological singularities. They cautioned against utopian thinking, against megalomania. They cautioned against external progress for the sake of external progress, but encouraged external progress for the sake of, and as an expression of, internal progress. 5b, and yet still they dared to be great and risk capital to undertake multi-generational mega projects for the sake of civilization itself. Whether we look to Machu Picchu, the Notre Dame, the pyramids, the great libraries of Alexandria, alexandria.wiki, and Nalanda, nalanda.wiki, or the Great Wall of China for inspiration, it's really hard to fathom just how great they were, just how courageous, just how ambitious, or how fun their parties must have been. They were willing to undertake projects that would take generations for their descendants to complete. And they did this knowing that they and everyone they know were going to die, like Ozymandias. That their descendants would eventually forget the names and everything about them and take it all for granted, like we do. That technological and civilizational progress was an illusion, and still they did these things. In summary, this brief history of simulation theory has just one point to make, which is Confucian you. Filial piety is the mother and father of all virtue, and its child is civilization itself. Whether or not we are religious, we need to get more pious about our ancestors and learn to appreciate our shared inheritance. Without comprehending the gift of civilization itself, how can we hope to build upon it? In summary, this brief history of simulation theory has just one point to make. Nirvana is hidden in samsara. In other words, you are a singularity living in a simulation. My fellow avatars, we are thus come and gone. Our once and future work here is both finished and well begun. There's time for more Q&A on the dance floor. Let's party.